Why, hello. My name is Captain Timothy Pemberton. I am the business administrator for the Salvation Army Adult Rehabilitation Center in Anaheim, California. I was asked to share my testimony, and my testimony starts when I was a kid. I grew up in a little town in Los Angeles called Wilmington, California. My father was an alcoholic and my mother was a drug addict. We lived with my grandmother, and she offered a sense of stability for our family. My father, on many occasions, got blackout drunk, and he was very abusive, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so I grew up in a state of terror, not knowing what's going to happen next, not knowing if my father was going to freak out, if he was getting drunk, until about the age of 12 to 14 years old. My mother got a weight loss surgery. Back then it was experimental. And she lost a bunch of weight, but it caused a lot of health problems for her. She was put on narcotic painkillers, and she became addicted to those for the rest of her life. And ultimately they led to her death. She lost a lot of weight, and because of that, she took the initiative to start going out to clubs at night, hanging out with all kinds of individuals that were not necessarily the best individuals to hang out with, drug dealers and drunkards and philanderers. And she ended up meeting a man who she moved in with. She moved the whole family in with them. So there I was. I was about 12 years old, living at some other strange man's house. And my father and my mother were in talks, and my father agreed to go to AA. And so my mother and father reunited for a short time. When I was 14 years old, they split for good. And when they split for good, my mother got involved with methamphetamine. And she's actually the one who introduced me to methamphetamine, inadvertently. So I knew that she was doing it. So when the opportunity came up to try it for the first time with my friends, I didn't pass up the opportunity. That pretty much summed up my youth. From 14 on, I was bouncing back and forth between my mother and my father's house, and I was pretty free to do whatever I wanted. So I had a pretty wild teenage years where it was about drugs, alcohol, and rock and roll. I kept drinking to a blackout. So the very first time that I ever drank, I drank to a blackout. You know, I'm one of those original alcoholics, the hopeless kind, the ones that are always going to drink to a blackout if they've given the opportunity. And so I drank to a blackout, and the very first time I was with my friend Brandon and my friend Scott. And my friend Brandon, he actually pulled me over because I started to aspirate. I threw up, and the throw up was going down in my lungs, and so he pulled me over and saved my life. My friend Scott said his life is pointless. Why are you going to save him? Just let him die. And I was like, if friends like that, who needs enemies? But I grew through the teenage years. I bought a motorcycle. I had a lot of fun, and I got into a lot of trouble. The very first time I was arrested, I was 16 years old. And I got arrested for not paying my traffic tickets. That was the very first offense that I had. Beyond that, I got arrested many more times. I met my wife Tanya at the age of, I think I was 16 and she was 12 or 13 when we first met. She ended up moving in with me when she turned 15, or she was almost 16, and I was 18, 19. And we started doing drugs together. So we had a great life of partying and having fun. but ultimately that drinking to a blackout got me in trouble over and over. I remember waking up in a jail cell on many occasions when I was 19 and 20, not knowing how I got there, having a spit mask over my face. Sometimes I had charges such as battery on a law enforcement officer, and so forth and so on. And so our early relationship was full of turmoil, ups and downs, and in and out of jail for sure. And that led to getting in trouble with the law one more time. So we were driving through the state of Texas, and I had over an ounce of methamphetamine in the back of the car. And I was driving erratically, and the night before I had been pulled over in Arizona, and I felt this sense of the Lord. And I wasn't really fully a believer at that point. I had gone to Christian school at one point, and my mom, when I was younger, she tried to give us some stability in our home by taking us to church, and I honestly thank her for that. I believe though that today she's in the presence of the Lord. She lived a lifestyle that was outrageous, but I do believe that she loved God, and the scriptures of the hired hands. I believe that she did come to the Lord, and she was saved. So even though the addiction eventually took her out many years later, I believe that she's in the presence of the Lord. Back to my story, we were driving through Arizona, running drugs, and we got to the state. I got pulled over, and I had this sense of this feeling. I heard this song "Silent Night" on the radio. I'm like, I am doing the wrong thing with my life right now. I believe that moment God was speaking to me. He was letting me know that I was getting ready to go down a pathway of destruction. And I ended up getting pulled over. So it was like a shot across the bow. I got pulled over, and the cop just gave me a speeding ticket that night. But the very next day, as we were in the state of Texas, I saw a vehicle off the side of the road. You know, when you're on methamphetamine, you think you're invincible. I saw a vehicle on the side of the road, and I looked at Tanya. She was in the passenger seat, and I said, "Do you think that's a cop up there?" And she says, "I don't know." I said, "Well, let's find out." And so I floored it with, like I said, an ounce of methamphetamine in the trunk. I floored it, and I flew past the cop doing about 95 miles an hour, and sure enough, he pulled me over. I had some dope out on the front seat, and so I knew that he was going to find that. So I told him where that was. And then he asked me if there was any more in the car, and I said no. And he asked if he could search the car, and I said yes. And that was stupid. He already had probable cause because of the dope that was on the seat. But they brought the dogs out. The dogs didn't find anything, and they just tore the car apart, and they ended up finding it. So I was arrested in Texas, and I ended up going back. So I bailed out, and I kept going back to Texas for a while. And I ended up pleading out the case for a deferred adjudication. I had 8 years of supervised probation, and I had to do 6 months in county. So they suspended the 6 months in county. They were going to allow me to do it because I had already gotten a job by that point while I was out on bond, and they had let me serve out my time a little bit at a time over the course of the next 8 years. However, went back to we left Texas. We went to Kansas, where we were going to distribute the drugs, and we ended up not meeting with the police officer that wanted to meet with us there so that we would roll on our buyers. And so we decided that was not the wisest choice because the buyer was a sheriff in Kansas. And so we decided that it wasn't a good idea to roll on the sheriff with the Kansas investigators, Kansas Department of Investigation is what they called it. And so we ended up just leaving Kansas, and we headed back to California, but we ran out of gas in New Mexico, and Tanya's dad lived there, so we ended up moving in with him. And I got a job there while I was out on bond, like I had mentioned a few minutes ago. And I was doing air conditioning work. I had gotten some training from my uncle. I was doing some air conditioning work there in Albuquerque, and so they were just going to let me ride out my uh, time in jail on my vacation for the next 8 years and see how far that got me caught up, and then maybe have to either dismiss or serve the last of it. Well, I continued drinking, and I continued getting arrested. And so, when you end up on deferred adjudicated probation, and you're getting arrested, well, they're going to take you to jail, and when they take you to jail, they're going to violate you. Well, they didn't violate me, but Texas said, since you're not working and you're in jail, come on back, boy, and serve that 6 months that you owe us. So I went and checked myself in to the jail in Dalhart, Texas. While I was there for 3 months, they asked me if I wanted a program, and I said, yes, I do. I can't get a handle on my addiction, so they sent me to another 6 months. So I ended up doing 9 months in Dalhart, Texas, or 3 months in Dalhart, Texas, and another 6 months in San Angelo, Texas, at the Court Residential Treatment Center. When I was in Albuquerque in jail, there was these two gentlemen that came to me, Jim and Curtis, and they introduced me to Jesus again. They prayed with me, and they led me in the prayer of salvation. And so after I got done in my time in Texas, I went back to Albuquerque and I looked them up, and I started attending their church. Their church was a little bit outlandish to me. They were all talking in tongues and doing those dances, so they were Pentecostals. By the way, all these years later, Pentecostals are my people. They're a Holy Spirit movement. The Salvation Army is a movement of the Holy Spirit, and definitely Pentecostals are a Holy Spirit movement. Some of them, I think some of them fake it. But that's neither here nor there. I ended up back down the street at a different church. My daughter was born. We were doing good. I had gotten a year or two of sobriety under my belt, and doing air conditioning work. We were making good. We bought a house. We bought an RV. We bought a car. We bought a truck. We had 2 foster kids, and so the miracles of recovery happened. I had a lot of stuff that came to me in a short amount of time. And I was really, really blessed. And I kept going to church, but I wasn't involved. I wasn't getting planted and rooted in the church. I was just an attender of the church. Every Sunday, I would go down and drop my daughter off at the junior church, the preschool church. And I would go sit in the chair, and halfway through the sermon, I'd get up and go use the restroom, so I could stay awake through the whole sermon. The pastor was amazing. He was a great preacher. But then when my foster kids were adopted, I was very sad, and I was going through interferon ribavirin treatment for hepatitis C. More wreckage from the past, from bad decisions in my previous life. And so I started drug seeking. I started going out looking for something that would make me feel better while I was on the ribavirin. And that's when I found Vicodin. And I started taking Vicodin quite a bit. I found a doctor that would prescribe it to me. I went to a pain management doctor, a pill mill in Albuquerque, and they just started writing me prescription after prescription of fentanyl and Vicodin and morphine and Oxycontin. And so there I was. I was beating this hepatitis C. My foster daughters were being taken away, and I was in a very sad spot. So I didn't taper off the medication at the end of the treatment like I was supposed to. I just cold turkeyed it, and I just felt really out of it, uneasy, angry, discontent, and I knew better. But I went ahead and looked at my wife Tanya at the time, and I says, "Do you want to go get some meth?" And she said, "Sure." And I says, "We're about to go on a really wild ride." And she said, "I know." And so we were off and running for another 6 to 7 years, and we lost everything except for our kids and our marriage, but we came close to losing both of those. We lost the house, we lost the RV, we lost the boat, we lost the truck, we lost the motorcycle, and it was a very sad time in my life. So there I was in my apartment living room, trying to fix a motorcycle tire with a can of Fix-A-Flat, a hot glue gun, and a piece of rubber, trying to glue the rubber back on. And at that point in my life, I knew that I needed a change again. And so we we were running drugs at that time, and we made a trip to California, and I took Brittany to Disneyland. You know, I was still getting high, and I took her to Disneyland, and we went to the ocean, and I looked out of the ocean, and I was like taken back. I was like, oh, we need to move back to California. And I believe that was the second time in my life God was speaking to me. The first time was in the car where I wasn't supposed to be running drugs. The second time was when I was looking out of the ocean. I knew, don't know why I knew it, but I knew that I had to pack my family up and move them to California. We did that, and I ended up looking for a job out in California, and I found one sight unseen at a place called San Diego Chiller. And so we looked on Craigslist, and we found a house for rent, and we were still in New Mexico, and we went ahead and had the owner of San Diego Chiller drive out and look at the house, and it was a great house, and he says it's a great starter house here in San Diego, and the price was great, so we put a deposit on it. We packed up our family, we moved out here, hoping to get away from the drugs. But go figure, there's drugs in San Diego just like there was in Albuquerque. As a matter of fact, there's more drugs in San Diego than there was in Albuquerque, because I was the one that was bringing them to Albuquerque from California. So I don't know what my thinking was, but I do know that God told me I had to move to California, but I didn't know it was God at the time. We ended up out there for a little bit longer. My wife and I almost divorced. There was actually a time where my wife and I were split, and she was at her mom's house, and I was like, okay, you know what? I know she's getting high, and I know she's bringing drugs around my children. I was just drinking at the time. And so I take a drug test, and I tell her, you know what? Here, take this drug test. Take my daughter in the bathroom. Go take this drug test. Pee in this cup. Come back out here. We're going to test it. And if it's negative, then I'm going to give you all this money. I had a whole pile of money in my wallet. And I also said, if it's negative, you can have all this money, and you can have the kids, and I'll just get supervised. I'll get visits, not supervised visits. I came back positive, and so she pours the urine out on the carpet, accusing me of putting drugs in the cup before she peed in it. And I was like, that's absolutely not true. So I loaded up my son, my infant son. He was about 9 months old at the time, and I told my daughter to come on, but she was afraid to leave. She was in a weird place, and we put our kids in the middle of our craziness, and that was so uncalled for from us. So I drove my son back to San Diego, and I spent the night with him. The next day I was drinking because I knew that she was coming down to San Diego. I was hoping she would bring me Brittany, and I would get both the kids, and everything would be done for her. However, I was drinking quite a bit, and so she says she's not leaving the kids with me because I'm just a drunk. And I said, yes, you are. So I called the police. The police showed up, and they took her side, even though she was high on methamphetamine. They took the tweaker side over the drunk side, and so she whispers in their ear, "Be careful. He has priors of battery on a law enforcement officer." And so before I know it, the cops were at my side saying, "Timothy, put your hands behind your back. We're going to take you to jail." I said, "The hell you are!" And they ended up grabbing me by my arms, and they couldn't force my arms behind my back, and they said, "Comply or we're going to tase you." And then sure enough, they shot me with a taser gun right there in front of my daughter and my wife, and I was flopping around on the ground, and I sobered up pretty quickly. It was almost instant. And then I was laying on the ground, and they were still talking, and I'm like, "Leave my kids here. She's a tweaker. She's high." And so I roll over on my back, and they said, "Roll over on your stomach, we're going to tase you again." I said, I probably said an F word or something at them. And then they tased me again. So I got tased twice in the same day by the San Diego Police Department. Ended up in jail for a couple days. And you would think that would be enough to make somebody quit drinking. But no, it wasn't. She was gone, and I started drinking a lot heavier. she ended up getting in a fight with her mother and brother because he was tweaking and bringing all kinds of riffraff over to her mom's house. So they thought that my wife thought it was better to move back to San Diego to be with me, where at least the kids were safe. In all that craziness, we always made sure that the kids were safe and outside the circle of craziness as much as possible. Even though we were in the middle of a storm and they were there with us, we tried to protect them as best as possible. So she moved in with back in with me, and she ended up going to this place. So remember, we moved to this place. There was just a couple of blocks from we moved to this place sight unseen from Albuquerque, and it was just a few blocks from the Salvation Army Range Oak Croc Community Center. So she started taking my daughter down there to the troops program and to the other things, and she wanted me to come down and have dinner with them, because on Wednesday nights they had what was a community dinner before they had their troops program. And so that Wednesday night that I was supposed to show up there, I went out drinking instead. The alcohol was calling me again. And I got so drunk I got into a DUI accident in my company vehicle, and I also stole a cart so I ran from the police and I stole a maintenance cart from the hospital down the street. And I was at my rock bottom. I was at my low, and I was in jail. And she came to see me, and she was going to tell me, Timothy, it's over. We're getting divorced. I win. You're in jail. There's no way there's going to be a judge that gives you the kids. And so she takes the kids to the lady next door and says, can you look after the kids for a minute? And she comes back, or she goes over there, and the lady, and she says, yeah, I'm going to go tell Tim that I'm getting divorced. It's done. And the lady next door says, Tanya, are you stupid? He's at his rock bottom. Are you going to give him up now and let some other woman come in and scoop him up when there's only up for him to go? And those words resonated with her. And when she came down and visited me, she says, look, I'm coming down here because I really, really want this divorce. I've got these papers drawn up. I says, Tanya, I'm at my rock bottom and I need help. And she agreed to find me a program. So I knew from the 6-month program before that I just needed a program to get back on my feet, something that was long-term, that would give me a solid foundation. She went and she called up all these programs all around San Diego, and none of them would take me. And then she remembered that the gentleman, the officer at the Salvation Army, talked about a crack addiction that he once had and how he got help for it. So she called him up as a last ditch effort. She called him up and says, I need help from my husband. He's got a problem with drugs and alcohol. And the officer, he was so rude, he hung up on her. He says, let me call you right back. And so he called her back 5 minutes later. It says, when your husband gets released, keep him sober. I'm going to come and pick him up, and I'm going to take him to a program. That program ended up being the San Diego Adult Rehabilitation Center. That was a changing point in my life. So that Friday, I got Cinco de Mayo weekend, on Cinco de Mayo, I got released the day before, and I made it home, and I went and got my bottle, and I drank out my last swallow. Sounds like a country song. But after that was my last drink. I was picked up I went on Sunday to the Range Oak Croc Community Center, and in that chapel right there, the theater, I got down on my knees and I gave my life to Jesus for the very first time, for real. And I went to the San Diego program for 6 months, and my family, they became homeless because of me, because I went to the program. They couldn't pay the rent. But in that time, the Croc Center gave my wife a job as a social service worker, a social service director, and they also gave my family a place to live at the Door of Hope, a transitional living center for women and children. And so the Salvation Army provided every single one of our needs for almost a full year. And that year was the best year of our lives. It was the year where we went to counseling and we rebuilt our relationship. We went to parenting classes and we rebuilt our parenting skills. And it was the launching board that sprung us into everything else that we've become today. And that was 18 years ago. I'm starting to run out of time, so I'm going to fast forward. While in the shelter, my daughter was involved with a program called Pictures of Hope. It was a fundraiser for the shelter. World-renowned photographer Linda Solomon came and took pictures, helped the children come and take pictures, and taught them how to take pictures. They ended up taking a picture. My daughter ended up taking a picture of the San Diego State University sign with her picture of hope stating, I pray to go to college one day, or something along those lines. That picture, that card, made it to the desk of the San Diego State president's desk and their alumni foundation. And when my daughter was 9 years old, she was afforded a full ride scholarship to San Diego State University as long as she kept her grades up and was accepted, as any other kid would be accepted. And she ended up volunteering in homeless shelters when we moved back together. And she was working with this photographer, Linda Solomon, and she was so taken back by my daughter's generosity and her loving heart that she called up Chevrolet one day and said, I've got this girl who has been volunteering, giving herself selflessly for these homeless shelters, trying to pour into these other kids' lives of where she had come from. And she said item number 2 on her list, so they had made a list of their wishes and they were going to go take pictures of them. Item number 2 on her list was a new car. And so when my daughter was 16 years old, right before her 16th birthday, General Motors and Linda Solomon and the Chevy place down there, I can't remember the name of it, awarded her what they coined the Spark of Hope Award for her sharing hope. And she received a brand new car on her 16th birthday. And at that point, we were already cadets at officer training school. And my wife and I were just blown away at all the miracles that had taken place. When we started to just give our all to God, He started to bless us immensely. And some material stuff, but mostly spiritually. And that was 12 years ago when we were at officer training school. And then after that, we were appointed to the Santa Monica ARC, where I was able to come full circle because I went through the ARC, and God had me in charge of the ARC, overseeing men and women who are in recovery. God allowed me to go on to The Price is Right, where I won a trip that God knew that we were going to need when we came out of COVID because we were burnt out. So we went to St. Martin after COVID on a trip that I won at The Price is Right because we have a station in Santa Monica. I serve an amazing God. So I want to share with you a couple of my phrases that I love. So I once was a hopeless dope fiend, and now I'm a dopeless hope fiend. And every day I still get to overdose, but I get to overdose on the Holy Ghost. God has blessed me beyond my imaginations. Today I serve as the administrator for the largest ARC in the Western Territory. I'm in charge of the Anaheim ARC, where I can have up to 177 men and women, and that I can pour into who are just like me. I want to thank you all for sharing this time with me and listening to me. I want to thank Captain Stokes for allowing me to shoot this video and share my experience, strength and hope with you. When you're going through the darkest valley, just imagine that God's got a better plan for you. And nobody can outgive God. When you start surrendering to Him, dedicating your life to Him, He is going to open up the floodgates of heaven upon your life here. But even more importantly, when we believe in Him, when we come to faith in Him, it says in John 3:16, for God so loved you and I that He gave Jesus so that we should not perish, but have everlasting life when we believe in Him. God speaks that truth into my life every single day. And He also, in a couple of right after that, in a couple of verses, He said that He came into the world to share the light, so that in Him there is no darkness. Addiction is darkness. Jesus is the light. Thank you for letting me share. God bless you all.